Let me jump on here. Hello, everybody. Hopefully you can hear and see okay. We're streaming live right now. Welcome to the official Bay Area home buying workshop. If you're planning to buy a home in 2026, you're in the right place right now. So our goal is to have you comfortable, confident, and knowledgeable about your investment coming into the next year. And you might be asking yourself, what qualifies us and the group that you're going to see here today to host the official Bay Area's workshop. And just a quick breakdown experience. I've been in this industry for 28 years, pushing 29 years now, second generation realtor. The group that you're going to see on here, their experience as far as realtors ranges from 5 years to 12 years, 13 years, right around there. And then we have a mortgage lender on here that will also have a ton of experience. He's basically got the same numbers as me as far as experience goes. So also we're homeowners, we're investors. So we've got a lot of experience coming through this process. So showing you who is going to speak today, I'll give you a quick little preview here of the group of people that we have coming in. We're going to add everybody up here into the stage so you can see everybody through this process. This is the group that's going to be coming to you live today. We have Jason Smiley from Chase Mortgage. We got Chris Walker, as well, a third generation realtor, Shannon Ellison, and Adam Busmaha. So this is your group that's coming at you live today. So we're going to try to wrap up here with you in about 60 minutes with a Q&A to follow at the end when we come through there. And so when we go through that Q&A, feel free to bring any questions you have, stay online afterwards. Also, you can put some comments over here on the side, and we'll do our best to get to those as soon as possible. So here's what we're going to be covering today. We're going to talk about market conditions and understanding market conditions and what's ahead for 2026. We're going to talk about how to get pre-approved the right way. We're going to talk about how to select and work with a realtor. We're going to talk about navigating your home journey from start to finish. We're going to give you some tips for evaluating properties and neighborhoods like a pro would. We're going to show you ways to avoid common first-time homebuyer mistakes. And we're also going to show you how to prepare an offer the right way. And believe me, there is a wrong way. So that's a big key that we'll hit at the end. So if you do have any questions in the meantime, again, drop them in the chat. Be sure to send to everybody in the chat. And take plenty of notes. You'll thank me later. Lastly, stay tuned at the end to learn how to stay in the know with all the latest market changes and insights. We're going to share that with you. And one small but very important request. If you find this workshop informative, please share it with others. Our future dates are going to be announced at the end of today. So excellent. With that, let's get popping over to the market. This, I got to tell you, is the first question everybody asks us about the market. There's our little list. Here's the market. So this is the first thing that everybody always asks people in real estate all the time. How's the market? What's the market doing? How is the market? So I'm going to give you a good breakdown on here as far as what we're usually being asked, what inventory rates, prices, the talk of a looming crash, and how that affects everybody. So let's get underway with those pieces right here. So national news versus local news and local facts. This is the first thing that I want to mention. I've lived in the Bay Area for a long time, Cupertino, Los Gatos, and I've seen everything come and go in that area for decades. And one of the things that I want to stress is quite often we see national news about the real estate market and how things are going and how sales are going and how inventory is going, what's happening with prices. All of these things come together. We're kind of in a bubble in Silicon Valley. And so while some of that national news can be reflective of some of the things that are happening, there's a big difference as to what happens here. One of the reasons clearly is our prices. Our prices are different. There's nowhere to build. We also have such a tech influence in the area that some of the wealthiest people per se all live in this area, even if they're working jobs as engineers. And so that's a piece just to keep into mind. So even in the Bay Area, interesting fact, only about 35% of people can afford to buy a house in the Bay Area. So those people, when you look at the top 35% of income in the Bay Area, that will tell you why we're a little bit different as far as power and spending power and the facts that affect us. Our inventory is always very low. Our competition usually tends to be very high. So when you see national news, make sure you go down a little bit deeper to dig into it, because we are going to see a definite unicorn effect for our local area. So that's the first thing that I want to talk about. The second thing I want to talk about with the market is there are a lot of people out there that like to talk about the market, and most of them are not real estate experts. So they put themselves out there. They look at different economic models. They look at new construction housing. They look at certain inventory models, which are all a little bit different. So there's a ton of data out there, and it's important to understand how to understand and depict that data so it makes sense for where you're at. So a lot of the stuff that you're going to see out there is basically clickbait. They want you to come and watch their channel. They want you to pay attention. They want you to read their publications, whatever the case may be. So one of the perfect examples that you're going to see this past year and this past 2 years is the record low sales that we have, and how that's really bad for the market because we have a record low number of sales. So you're seeing kind of a turn that, oh, that's a bad thing because nobody's buying homes. The correlation to that's not being told is we also have a record low amount of inventory. So for recorded sales, the last 2 years have been the lowest amount of recorded sales and inventory since we've been keeping that data in this industry. So basically, if you don't have a lot of homes to buy, you can't have a lot of sales. And so that's a big factor of what we're dealing with. So just something to pay attention to. So where are we now? What's happened now? How have things been? This year, 2025, has been a good, healthy year, is really a way to put it out there. If everybody remembers, right after the pandemic, things went really crazy. We were seeing 20, 30 offers. If you remember that, houses going for crazy, crazy prices. And honestly, in Silicon Valley, 70% of the time, our market is what you would consider a multiple offer market. So at least 2-3 offers on a home, sometimes 20 or 30, depending on the location, price, so on and so forth. It's not unusual in our area. So this year, we definitely saw that slow down. We did see instances of those multiple offers, but we saw instances also of homes that sat on the market for longer, homes that buyers were able to negotiate on, right? And a lot of times that's condition, location, so forth. We saw some fluctuation with interest rates as well, which had a lot of effect on that. Jason from Chase will talk about that a little bit later as well. So we saw inventory start to tick up a little bit. Things start to slow down a little bit. Interest rates came down. People amped up. We started to see over the past couple of years a stalemate. This is kind of what we're running into. There is what is called a seller lockdown right now. So most of the sellers, 90% of them, are also home buyers. And a lot of those sellers, when they go to buy their next home, they're looking to upgrade to a home or relocate to another area with better schools or whatever the case may be. So the problem is the majority of those sellers right now have 3% interest rates on their mortgages or even less. And so for them to make the decision to buy a home, they got to say, okay, we're going to sell this home and now I'm going to pay 6% or higher, double what my mortgage rate is to get the next home, which basically became a lockdown for them. And it didn't make sense for them unless they had like a big life change that was into effect at that point in time. So that really has held the inventory down and the sales down as well. So even though we saw some homes sit on the market for a little longer, even though we saw lower sales, we saw houses keep their value. So houses went up year over year in value this year. It wasn't significant, but it was up. So, and a lot of that is because we just have that lockdown. If we don't have a bunch of inventory come on the market, you can't see a market crash. So when we talk about that looming crash and everything going, you have to have a lot of inventory hit the market that is not selling. And that's where I want you to pay attention to something called absorption rate. Absorption rate is a big number that we use all the time. If you follow our updates, you'll hear that number discussed often. And that's basically the percentage of homes that are on the market that are selling. That's what an absorption rate is. So right now, to give you an idea, just as a couple of days ago in Santa Clara County, we'll use that specifically, the absorption rate for single family homes was 62%. So 3 out of every 5 homes are selling. The absorption rate for condos and townhomes was 37%. So 1 out of every 3 are selling. Now, what does that number mean specifically? 60% is largely considered a seller's market. So when you're at 60%, that usually means the seller has more control than the buyer. When that starts to go up 70, 80, 90%, then we see sellers get more and more control the higher that is. When we see it go lower, we see buyers get more and more control. So sitting right around 62%, honestly, is a very healthy market. We've seen over the past couple of years, 90%. We've even seen 110% absorption rate. That means homes can't come on the market fast enough. They're selling while they're coming on. And so right now it's healthy. So there's a couple segments to look at. Single family homes, townhomes, condos. Whenever we see more of a healthier normal market, we're going to see differences. Single family homes tend to hold their value, sell faster, get higher prices over the process because they attract more people. They have a larger audience of people that want to buy them. Townhomes and condos, it's a secondary market after that. It's also a first-time home buyer market. So first-time home buyers are more affected by interest rates at that point in time as far as affordability goes. So that's something to keep in mind and why we see that slow down. Also now, if you take townhomes and condos and you go from 3 bedrooms to 2 bedrooms to 1 bedrooms, you're also going to see an effect also. So 3 bedrooms will actually still do pretty good. And so they're going to be above that 37% for condos and townhomes. They're going to do pretty well because people who can't afford or don't want to stretch to get into a single family home will settle for a 3-bedroom townhouse or condo generally. 2 bedrooms and 1 bedrooms usually are going to lag behind a little bit. 1 bedrooms are really slow right now. They're below 20% absorption rate. And that's basically, again, those are the entry level of first-time home buyers that are just really waiting for that interest rate to come down. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So last piece I'll say, going to the upcoming year, where inventory is right now, where the levels are, everything looks pretty healthy. I would expect a pretty strong spring as far as sellers go next year. So it'll get more and more competitive as we're getting to that because inventory just keeps coming down. Pending sales are still pretty high. And one of the very telling signs that we see are purchase applications, mortgage applications, people that are applying to be approved. That number has gone up over and over again, month over month, week over week, year over year. So people are starting to come out. We've had that slowdown of basically 2 years where people are waiting for the interest rates to come down. They're realizing the miracle rate's probably not going to come back, if ever, so anytime soon. And so now they finally made that decision. Okay, we're going to get ready and we're ready for this. Jason will talk a little bit more about rates as well, because I think there will be a lot to learn about that. The last piece that I want to add on here is just a story to come out of here. Of course, everybody has a question. What's going to happen for home prices next? What is coming next? So I mentioned I was a second generation, still am a second generation realtor. And one of the things that I wanted to bring to light on there was my father, when he was a realtor, worked out of Cupertino, lived in Cupertino. And there was a house that sold for Cupertino. This is a while ago, but there was a house that sold for Cupertino for $100,000. And when that first house sold for $100,000 in Cupertino, everybody in the city was in panic. Holy cow, this is ridiculous. We can't handle these kind of prices. The market's going to crash. Nobody can afford this. And over again, that segment came. That was the narrative that came out at that time. That same house that sold for $100,000 is worth over $4.5 million now. And so we're going to continue to see that. We live in an inflation economy. Prices will always tend to go up. There's going to be some lulls. There might be a couple dips, but it's always going to go. So if you're in it for the long haul, you're in good shape. The first place that I ever bought in Cupertino cost me, it was a townhouse, first thing I ever bought long time ago for $500,000, is now worth over $2 million for that particular property. So you're always going to see things that happen and things that shake over there. So that's an entry level. That's how people get in. That's how they take their equity and they move up to the next spot. So last thing I'll touch on this. I do a thorough update each and every month. Annual predictions for the years. We just actually released our 2025 results of our predictions, and our newest update is going to be coming in right after the first of the year. So again, we'll have that access over here for you later. So that is my piece on what I have to say about the market. If you have any questions on there and comments, I'll be happy to jump into those later. In the meantime, I'm going to bring up our next guest speaker over here, which is going to be Jason Smiley from Chase Mortgage. Jason, we appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to share your amazing wisdom with all these people. And I'm going to pass it on over to you.
Thanks, Keith. I'm Jason Smiley with Chase, JP Morgan Chase. one of the biggest banks in the country. So you've probably heard of the name. So I've been doing this for 22 years. So not quite as long as Keith. Keith said I was almost as much as him, but not quite as old as him. So keep that in mind. Anyway, I've been around long enough to see the different cycles that we've seen. I was around for the crash in 2008, in the mortgage business, seeing people doing short sales, and then the huge opportunity that followed for a lot of buyers in 2010, 2011. Not everybody picked up on it, including me. I knew that it was a good opportunity, but unfortunately didn't have the capital. So anyway, those opportunities come and go. And it's my opinion that I think we're in an opportunity now where you're going to see prices continue to go up. I think there's a lot of news stories out in the ether that talk about, prices crashing, and in some of the parts of the country that has been the case, but the Bay Area is a lot different, and we'll talk about the differences when it comes to mortgages too. Speaking of the news, I just wanted to transition into just something topical that's in the news today, and something that probably comes up in your feed. But the Fed came out today with their announcement, and they decided to lower rates by 0.25%. So first things first, let's talk about that. Keith, if you could switch slides. There you go. Thank you for shrinking me. So when the Fed lowers interest rates, they're lowering short-term interest rates. They're not necessarily lowering directly long-term mortgage rates. Mortgage rates operate on a slightly different scale. And so this chart that I put up here, it's because I'm 50 years old, it's over the last 50 years. You can see mortgage rates over the last 50 years. And I do this for two reasons. Number one, to show the discrepancy between the Fed funds rate, which is what the Fed controls, and the 30-year fixed rate, the average 30-year fixed rate. So you can see how there's sometimes bigger gaps between the Fed funds rate and mortgage rates. Sometimes it's smaller. But you can also see where we're at today as far as mortgage rates go. So on the right, 2025, we're hovering just above 6%, around 6.2% for the current interest rate for 30-year fixed. If you look a little bit back, let's say in the 2005 area, anything before that, rates were pretty much above 6%. So we had this anomaly over a 15-year span where rates were just extraordinarily low. We saw interest rates down into the 2.5% range. That's unusual. We should not expect that to happen again. A lot of people have gotten more used to this, over the past couple of years. It's been about 3 years since rates went up from that 2.5% level. And so I think a lot of buyers, sellers, a lot of people are getting more accustomed to the idea of rates being around this, 6± % range. So anyway, that also leads into the demand. So let's move on to the next slide so we can talk about, the forecast for rates. So when we're looking at, if you're looking at buying in 2006, it's important to think about interest rates, of course. So a lot of the economists that put their forecasts out there, I put them up on the screen here, with Goldman Sachs being on one of the higher end of things. Realtor.com, they're in the 6.3, 6.4 range, and others are in the sub 6% range, but nothing extraordinary. It's nothing crazy from what we're at now. Right now we're at 6.19% was the most recent 30-year fixed mortgage survey that was out by Freddie Mac. And that seems to be kind of the consensus that we'll see rates in the 6 to 6.3 range. Myself, I think we'll see opportunities that drop below 6%, at least for this average 30-year fix. But one thing I want to point out is there's some differences between these national surveys for interest rates and the Bay Area. Number one being because of the loan amounts. They're so much larger in the Bay Area that the economy just works different. The economies of scale just works different as far as cost goes. So generally, you're going to see lower mortgage rates in the Bay Area than you would for most of the rest of the country. For example, I just locked somebody yesterday on a 7-year ARM, which I won't get into too much about programs or qualifying, but a 7-year ARM was at 5.25% with no points. Once again, I won't get into points. It's something that we can cover If you guys want to know more, I'm happy to go through it with you in a consultation. I can explain all of these things if you don't understand it. But anyway, rates for a 30-year fixed, I'm commonly seeing them below 6%, but that's for a jumbo loan. And so these surveys that you see in the news for the 30-year fixed, they're generally for a conforming loan. And the rates for conforming loans are generally a little bit higher than jumbo. So wanted to point out those things because you see a lot of things in the news, like Keith will point out, that are national figures. Things are different in the Bay Area. A lot of things are different, and including interest rates. So let's move on to the next slide. Actually, can you go back one slide? There's something I wanted to point out too. So I wanted to point out, in this chart or this image in the middle, where we were a year ago at 6.69% versus where we are now. So rates have come down 0.5% since last year. That's a pretty big deal. 0.5% is a pretty big move for mortgage rates. But if you look at the peak, there was a time where we were at 7.79%, which that felt like it was pretty high. I can understand why buyers were reluctant at the time, thinking that rates are just a little bit cumbersome, and it was blocking a lot of people from buying houses at the time. But if you look at the low point that we've seen over the last couple of years, where it was 6.11. So essentially right now, we're basically at a low point over the last couple of years. We're pretty close to a low point. And the Fed lowering rates does help. We generally go in the same direction. It's just not directly impacted by that. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. So something Keith wanted me to talk about is how to prepare yourself to buy a house in 2026. And granted, you can get pre-approved in a matter of a day or two. It's pretty quick, it's pretty easy, but the right way to do it is to start early. Like I say, it pays to be prepared, and being prepared, it gets you ready for those opportunities that come out of nowhere. Things move really quickly in real estate in the Bay Area. I would say it's even more so. So you need to be ready to act. You might see this house come on the market. It's going to be going, they're going to start taking offers, and maybe you can make a preemptive offer, and maybe you can just jump on it and just catch it real quick when nobody else is ready. So it pays to be prepared because you can have yourself, ready to go and ready to act. So the way you do that is the first step is just to have a consultation with a loan officer like myself, or anybody that you're referred to that's reputable in the industry. And like Keith often says, somebody that's local and understands the market. I wanted to touch on that part of it, in that, why it's important for your lender to be local. Because I work at Chase, we're licensed in all 50 states. I can help somebody in New York and Florida, Kentucky, anywhere in the country. I can help them with a loan. But quite often I refer those out to people that are local to that market, especially when they're buying houses. With refinances, it's not a big deal, but if somebody's buying a house, you need to know what the local customs are. So in the Bay Area specifically, things move much more quickly. We're accustomed to seeing close of escrow timelines in the 2 to 3 week range. Whereas if you get somebody that's a loan officer from Detroit, they're used to doing things in 30 to 45 days. It's a much different timeline that they're used to. The other thing is, I'm sure that the team will touch on this, but contingencies. When it comes to contingencies in the Bay Area, it's quite often a competitive market. And so you're going up with against other offers, and most likely you're going to need to go in with little to no contingencies in the contract. That's something that other lenders aren't used to in the other parts of the country. They're not used to going in without those protections that buyers typically have for financing and for appraisal. And so they're not used to usually reviewing your qualifications through the lens of someone that would be willing to attest to the fact that you're going to be approved and you won't have a problem getting the loan. So there's a couple of big things. There's other smaller nuanced details about someone that's local versus somebody that's not, but I think that's an important point. So let's talk about the process. So have a consultation with a loan officer. make a list of questions in advance. Things like, how long have you been in the business? I've got a list put together here. So how long have you been in the business? What's your typical timeline to close? That'll kind of often tell you if they're local or not, if they tell you. Does your company offer any relationship discounts, or would they be able to match a competitor's offer? It's a common thing in the Bay Area for lenders to compete with one another. It's a very competitive market. Will the loan be sold after closing? There's different types of lenders out there that you might work with a bank or a credit union or somebody that's a depository lender where they don't often sell the loan afterwards. But then there's other lenders out there that are non-bank lenders, and almost every loan they do, they sell it to another source. So you don't really know who you're going to get to be working with beyond that point of the close of escrow. And then a good question to ask is, what areas do you serve primarily? That kind of tells you where they're used to working. The Bay Area, I work all over the Bay Area, but more specifically in the kind of the South Bay region, but I can help pretty much anywhere in the Bay Area. So the process for getting pre-approved is to complete an application. You fill out a loan application. Usually it's done online with just about every lender. And then they'll give you a list of documents. We'll give you a list of documents that we need to get, things like pay stubs, W-2s, bank statements, sometimes tax returns, sometimes information on businesses or other real estate that you might own. And then one of the most important reasons to do this early is the soft credit check. And that's usually the benefit of doing that soft credit check in the beginning when you get pre-approved, is that the loan officer or me, we can flush out any potential issues that you might come across. Things like maybe a collection popped up on your credit, or maybe your balance on one credit card is higher than it should be, and it's bringing your credit score down. So a big part of what your interest rate is, how it's determined, is based on what your credit score is. It's a combination of your down payment and credit score primarily, amongst other more minor factors, but those are the big ones. So you want to have your credit score as high as possible. And even if your credit score is good, let's say your credit score is 760, there might be things that I could tell you about your credit profile that you could improve over the course of a month or two. And so then you're ready to go with a higher credit score 3 or 4 months from now. And there's very rarely any cost to getting pre-approved. With Chase, there's no cost to getting pre-approved. And there's really no downside. It gives you a lot of information. It gets you prepared, and there's really no downside. And then pre-approvals are usually good for 90 days. That's the typical timeline. So if you're looking to buy, let's say in March, it would be great to do it, get that process started now. And then we can review your credit, make sure everything is good, give some tips on maybe improving and optimizing your credit. And then we can update your pre-approval very quickly. It's a matter of minutes before we can get everything updated. Maybe we do a quick soft pull of your credit again, ask you if you're still working at the same job, assets are in the same place, and ask if anything's changed. And then we can send over a new pre-approval letter. So you've already done all that legwork. And the important part is we can be ready to react. And I'm sure the team will attest to this, but things move very quickly. And so you want to be ready to go when the right opportunity comes. And a big part of that is getting the financing squared away. So that's all I have for you guys. Thanks for listening, and feel free to reach out if you guys would like a consultation. No cost, no dilemmas. Feel free to give me a call.
Awesome. Jason, thank you so much. And everybody will have all of Jason's information on here. There was a slide on it earlier, but we'll make sure it's available to you afterwards as well. The only thing I could say, Jason, you're always full of such knowledge. You just dumped about an hour and a half worth of talk into a few minutes. So well done. I know that a lot of people are drinking from a fire hose when it comes to that information. So I appreciate you sharing all of that. It's amazing. I know your level of knowledge and work ethic is off the charts. So I appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to be here with us. And everybody just put them on there. You have more questions. Jason's always happy to answer, even if it's after the seminar. So thanks, Jason. I appreciate you.
I'll stick around. So if you guys have questions, I'll be around.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. let's jump into, sorry, I'm having fun moving these cameras around. So I'm going to jump into the next piece that we're going to talk about here, which is how to select and work with a realtor. So we're going to try to keep you on time here. I'm going to roll through this pretty good. There's some good stuff to know on here as we do this. There's 4 different steps in there. I'll cover those. We'll talk about what the buyer broker agreement is because it's actual a legal requirement these days. So I'll tell you a little bit more about that as well. As we're going on. So let me pop in here. Okay, so picking a realtor. So the first thing that I could say about choosing an agent is it's more than picking the biggest name or trusting a friendly face. It's a lot more than that. It's about finding the truth. It's about finding the right fit for you and expertise. And I mean, really, like expertise, that should be non-negotiable. So, and you should learn more about that as we talk about this. So let's go to the 4 steps. The first one are the myths. So cut through the myths. Let me talk about what the myths are for realtors. The access myth. We're going to start with that. Have you ever heard the phrase, or when you get out there, you'll start to find that quickly. I have all these properties for sale that nobody else has. So the best results people get for properties is exposure. That's how they get the best results. So most people aren't going to just hold this segment of stuff on there that people don't have. Now, sometimes there's connections and there's relationships and there's ways to find those, but it's a very small amount of what's out there. The second one is the friendship trap. Just because somebody's a friend or they happen to have a real estate license doesn't mean they're always a great fit. They should be able to meet all the criteria as well. A vast majority of agents, this is a number that always blows people away, 10% of the realtors do 90% of the business. So a vast majority of agents do a vast majority of the business. Of course, if somebody does business longer, more number of transactions, they have better expertise. They usually can do a better job for you. Also, make sure that you interview for skill, not just relationship, right? You can have a relationship with somebody and they can have the skill. That's a win-win. But what I would always pose out there, would you write a check to your friend for $50,000 because you like them? I mean, that's something to think about because that could be a factor when it comes to this. The third one on myths is the vaulted promise. Be really very, very wary of hefty promises in results that they can provide to you without evidence or experience. If you hear something that's too good to be true, it usually is. But if you feel that you want to walk down that path, have them show it to you. Have them show you evidence or have them show you experience that they're able to get their clients' houses for 20% below list price, right? That they're able to win 20 multiple offers by being at the asking price, right? Have them show you evidence or experience of that to go through there. And then the last thing that I would touch on for the myths is just stale practices. So agents that rely solely on outdated methods. So it happens over time. Those that don't invest in top data-driven marketing, right? So there's a factor for that. The industry is always evolving. Just ask your Chat GPT about that. All right, that's the last piece. I'll go on to the myths. So let's go to the interviews, right? When you meet a realtor, interview with intention, right? It should be over Zoom or in person. So it should be that. See how we mix all of these up these days? So it should be in person or over Zoom. First impressions really do matter. So spend real time with them, 30 to 45 minutes. Dig beneath the surface, right? Get to know who they are, get to know their qualifications. Treat it like a partnership interview. You're going to be spending months with these people. And if they do a great job, you might be spending years or even decades with these people over time, right? So dig beneath the surface and treat it like, again, a partnership interview. Don't rush. We see so many of these people that just try to rush through somebody that's going to be on the side of saving or costing somebody tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. So don't rush that. Ask a lot of questions. Who, what, where, when, why. Those are all perfect examples. Probe an agent's experience, their style, their support systems, their approach. Learn everything you can about them. And when you probe them like this, it's going to expose their true expertise, which will help you make a better decision. So go in there ready to just ask everything. The other thing I'll say is hire slow and fire fast. So that very, very important. Make sure you're making the right decision. If it's not, end that immediately. Research thoroughly, compare agents, and don't hesitate to move on if you don't feel that it's the right fit. Your confidence and your decisiveness are true assets when you're going through this process. The last part I'll come into the interviews is be clear on your intentions. Communicate your particular wants and needs and standards to the agents that you're interviewing. The more precise you are with all of these, the better that agent can deliver. The one thing that I can say from 28 years of doing this, none of us are mind readers. So the more that's shared, the better everybody can do. And then comparisons. Compare apples to apples. So you need to come to realization with yourself what service means. There's a couple different things that you'll see out there. You'll see full service, high touch communication, cutting edge tools, and you'll see some realtors out there, real estate agents that are just a discount, right? They're different and they offer different services by necessity. So be clear of what you want when you go into there. So you want to interview agents with the same service philosophy, comparing ones that are in that same level together to see what's a better fit for you. Also check for education commitment. The best agents offer educational resources like comprehensive guides or workshops. Also detailed supports. Seek agents out with a tight focused support team. It really is, real estate is a career of many needed talents. There's a lot of things there. So a good support team with different talents is strong. And then they should have consistent meetings with you. They should have relationships with vendors. They should have a disciplined system that comes into effect. All of these things make for a superior client experience. And when you want the best results and you want that home that is yours, you're going to want that experience. Last part I'll hit on here is taking real action. Review references and results from the realtors. Ask for their testimonials, performance history, and successful negotiation examples, right? They should be able to show that. That agent should also understand contracts and fees. They can clearly and confidently explain them to you so you understand it clearly. Don't just start signing pieces of paper without knowing what you're signing, right? The agent should understand buyer agreements, they should understand commissions, and they should understand all the changes that are happening in the industry and the industry standards. And the last piece for real action, expect honesty and adaptability out of the agent. Agents who aren't afraid to tell you tough truths is important. Not a yes person. There's a lot of salespeople out there, not just realtors and real estate agents. There's a lot of salespeople out there that say yes and say exactly what you want just so they can get business. You want somebody that is not afraid to tell you the tough truth because this is your home that you're moving into and it's a large financial investment. So they should be able to adapt their approach and invest in ongoing learning. So that's your pieces for taking action. So it's not about hearing what you want. It's about partnering with someone who educates, empowers, and delivers modern results. Last piece I'll touch on there is that buyer broker agreement. It's the law, by the way, right now. If a realtor is showing you a home without a signed contract with you, they could be subject to suspension or lose their license. It is the same as a realtor who sells a home. You have to sign a contract with them to sell the home. As of last year, this changed as well. An agent who gives you any advice, shows a property to you outside of an open house, they have to have a signed contract with you. So to do that, there's two types of contracts, however. So keep this in mind. This is important. There's a single property buyer broker representation agreement. This is great if you've never worked with an agent before and you want to test the waters. You can say, I'm signing this just for you to show me this house. If you buy that house, you're going to have to use them. Okay. The second one is a buyer broker representation agreement. So this is the longer term commitment. If you found somebody you're comfortable with and you want to work with and commit to, that's the longer term one. By California law, it cannot exceed 90 days, however. So you still have a window that you're on there. The last piece that I want to do on a story on here, and then I'm going to pass this on to Chris so he can talk about the home buying journey. So working with anybody, often what we'll see is people working with a seller's agent. They go to an open house, the seller's agent's there. The seller's agent promises a deal, a rebate. They can get them the house, so on and so forth. So I've heard so many stories about this, and I've heard so many horror stories about this. But here's one that should hit home. A couple of years ago, when the market was changing and it was softening, when it was going from a crazy market to a slowing down market, there was a buyer that went into an open house, met with the agent that was in that open house, which is not an agent that's part of our team, but went into that open house, talked to that agent. That agent made a promise that they could get him the house. They would make sure their offer gets accepted and give them a little bit of a deal in the process. So that agent got excited. All right, it's a great house. They really like the neighborhood. They like the house. They didn't know that the market was changing. The agent didn't tell them the market was changing. So they ended up writing an offer for $120,000 over the asking price. Got the home. They were excited to get the home, to go through the process. Ended up finding out later they were the only offer. So the seller's agent would have known if there was another offer, right? They were the only offer that came to the process. So it's a terrible story, but it happens, and it happens more often than you would think. So the number one cause of lawsuits in real estate is a lack of or improper disclosures. In a case like this, they didn't know the market was changing. They didn't know that there weren't, more than one offers. That wasn't told to them that they were the only offer. And the number one situation for lawsuits in real estate is what you refer to as dual agency, where the buyer's agent is also the seller's agent. So it's the number one situation that lawsuits are on. So due diligence, make sure you're hiring the right people. There's a lot of very good realtors out there. Just make sure that you're hiring the right ones. So that's the last piece that I have to say about here. I'm going to bring Chris into here. Chris, welcome aboard. Thanks for your patience. So,
all right.
I thought that was going to go faster than it did. So we're going to put you into the journey and breakthrough here. Chris, third generation realtor. He's fantastic. He's been in this for well over a decade, pushing 12, 13 years at this point in time, has a wealth of knowledge that he's here to share with you. Chris, take it away.
Perfect. Yeah. So how's it going, everybody? I'm really just on this section. I want to go through like the whole process overview. Been through this countless times, and it's really important just to kind of understand the flow of each. Now, once again, in a preface here is I can go much, much deeper into a lot of these points, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to kind of keep it a good overview. And really the goal at the end of the day is for you to walk away from this at least a little bit more educated. Whoever you may work with out there, just being able to go out there and have some confidence in the market is going to make a really big difference in the experience for you. So hopping in onto number one right here is we just have interview multiple realtors. I know we just went into this. Of course, we always drive the point home. Everybody's got a cousin. Everybody's gotten a friend, right? This is your most important. And real estate agents are professional talkers, right? But can they walk the walk? So just make sure you're checking things. Go to sites like homes.com. Go look the agent up. See how much business they've done, right? And understand, right? There's a ton of different agents. Each of them has their own style of business, right? You've got turn and burn out there. You got discount. You've got full service, those types of things. So just understand before going in. The numbers are crazy when people choose the very first real estate agent they sit down with. So please do yourself a favor there, because this choice is going to make the rest of this process a much different experience one way or another. So after we've done that, you've signed your agreement, everything like that, you're ready to go kind of get serious about this. A good real estate agent is also going to be able to share with you the right type of connections that you're looking for out there, right? So maybe you're considering doing a fixer-upper style home, right? They can get connected with the right contractors, right? You want to interview different lenders, or you need to find a specific lender, right? An agent's going to have a lot of those in their pockets, right? You wear a lot of different hats on that matter one way or another. So that becomes important. So now you're moving into that loan approval process. So within the loan approval process, there's a few different approvals that you can get. You can have a pre-qualification, a pre-approval, and getting underwritten, right? And so 3 different situations, you're going to need to at least be at the pre-approval stage to seriously go and hunt for a house. And that becomes important with all those things considered. Any way, shape, or form, we're always going to recommend to try to go get underwritten. That is like the most solid piece of paper you can have when it comes to your qualification, when you're trying to write offers and having the other side understand that you are qualified for the home that we're coming after. So a few different types of lenders out there, right? You've got mortgage brokers, you got big banks, right? A couple of those things across the board. So sometimes your situation is unique. You need to get a little bit more, tricky with what you're trying to do, right? So that's going to really depend on who you're going with. A lot of common misconceptions in this realm is that, you're going to get your credit hit multiple times and it's really going to bring down your credit score. That's a big myth that a lot of people experience. And the way it typically works is it's actually more like buckets, right? So realistically, if you're sitting around, 760, 780, right, you're already getting to the point where you're not going to really get much of a better rate in those types of situations. Always talk to the lender about this. They're going to have a better idea and better explanation on what might make the most sense for you especially on the type of loan that you're looking for. So that becomes really, really important in that process. And just to clarify too, like going from pre-approval to underwritten is usually just a little bit more paperwork. So getting those things done. Your type of profession and things like that will take an effect as well when you're going through that route. So the next thing that we're going to go into is your wants and needs in touring homes, right? So when we're getting to this part, just consider, this is obviously the most fun, exciting part of it. Be within your means here, right? You've gotten your pre-approval. You should have a good idea of kind of what's within that budget range. And also with that pre-approval is just also understanding what does your payment look like, maybe in different threshold points or price points, right? Especially if you're considering different styles of homes, right? A new construction versus buying something that you are going to put your sweat equity into, right? So those all become important in that manner. But yeah, go and drive past homes, day, night, understand traffic, even stay in a hotel in the area if you're from out of the area, right? All of those make a really big difference. And of course, nothing beats understanding a house than like actually walking inside of it, understanding the quality and craftsmanship of the materials and everything like that. So one thing that we always recommend when it comes to really building that out and also understanding that there's a lot of different neighborhoods in the Bay Area, and each of them have their own pocket neighborhoods, their bonuses, right? Is just understanding that when you're approaching those situations, knowing that you have a little bit of a professional analysis on what's going on with that specific home, right? Like I said, sometimes homes can be a little bit of a lipstick on the pig kind of idea where it looks really nice, but it doesn't really have the bones of what we're really looking for a good purchase in those matters. All right. So say you found the house. Now really what we're going to get into is realistically, we're going to want to do our due diligence before making an offer or in the process of making our offer. And we'll also have that afterwards as well. So within that due diligence, we're really looking at a few things. And one of the most important things is just checking title, making sure there's no encumbrances, things like that. A lot of people do get scared of this in my experience because they're worried about unpaid taxes, things like that. It is actually title's responsibility to make sure that it's free and clear going over to you. And that's why title is actually involved in this whole process, because they're a third-party service that's essentially making sure that they're holding the funds. They're making sure everything comes free and clear to you when the home closes and it gets transferred over your way. Next thing is inspections. And I'm going to go into how to write a winning offer later, so I'll dive into this a little bit more in a bit. But the most important part of this is everybody's going to have disclosures, and you're going to really want to review those in detail. We've seen a lot of horror stories in the past where people will just get sent disclosures and say, hey, sign these and let's go right on the house. That is a big red flag, big no. You just want to make sure that you're checking the property report. Usually they're going to have a termite inspection as well, things like that to really bring in your whole idea of the house. Find red flags. And ultimately, if we find things that are problems, this can actually be a benefit to us because sometimes they're not that difficult to take care of. And the cost to take care of them is actually going to be a lot more beneficial for a possible deal you might get on a home or the change in the value of that home per its market value at the time. So something to consider there as well. Termites always scare people. So when we see those types of inspections and everything like that, they're very common to this area. They were here a lot longer. They've been here a lot longer since we've been a lot before we've been here. And so in that case, a typical house, especially a single family home in the area, we usually see about $5,000 to $7,000 of termite costs, kind of depending on what we're looking for. Very specific things that are going to be a bit larger red flags than some of the typical situations we're going to see. But those are things that we really want to consider across the board. Like I said, disclosures, we're going to have things that the actual owners of the home are really diving into, their knowledge of the property and everything. So, of course, we always want to trust what the sellers are sending our way, but you want to verify that as well and pull the pieces together. And there's a lot of smart ways to do that when that whole process comes through. Perfect. And then insurance as well. We just want to make sure everything on the home is looking as it should. And HOA, if you're considering a home that has an HOA, right, there's going to be a lot of HOA docs. Scanning through those, understanding the financials that the community might be in, if there's upcoming litigation, things where your HOA might increase, or just some crazy rules or laws that you might find in the HOA docs. We really want to navigate those as well. Perfect. So now we've done our due diligence. We go ahead and make our offer. Like I said, I'll go into that more in depth later down the line. But now once that's gone, we've gone through our negotiations. Hopefully we get the great news that our offer has gotten accepted. So now that our offer is accepted, the first major milestone that's really going to happen is that you're going to have your earnest money deposit due. And so that's usually referred to as an EMD as well. And so that's 3% of the purchase price, which is included in the down payment that you're putting. So if you had 20% down payment going in, right, 3% of that 20% would be the EMD that goes in, usually the day after you've accepted the contract. So something important to note, that you just have those funds ready and available when we're approaching that point. So now we've gone through everything. If we had contingencies, right, and a lot of times we're usually in a non-contingent market, which we'll go over that in a little bit. But if we had those contingencies, now that we've accepted it, we can go do additional inspections, those types of things. Fortunately, in our area, it's very typical for people to have inspections up front. If they don't, we're usually going to want a contingency, but at times we will even see people go non-contingent, even if we don't have certain levels of inspections. Every home is unique. Every situation is different. There's different markets for everything out there, whether it's a first-time home buyer, step-up buyer, or investor going after something. So all very, very different scenarios that take those considerations. So now we've gone through that. We've removed our contingencies. We're all speed ahead there at that point. So no turning back. You're ready to go forward on this home, all things considered. So now, once we've moved past that, there's going to be a lot going on in the back end that you're not going to be too aware of it. But most of the things that are going to be going on are signing boilerplate information, really letting the loan process, those types of things. The timeline that we usually have on this is usually very dependent on when the loan can get done. And like Jason said earlier, that's typically anywhere from like 14 to 30 days, as quickly as 7 days if it's an all cash purchase. So that's usually where that's going to happen. Now that we've moved through, we're going to be waiting for that appraisal. And so really that's just the bank letting us know that they agree with the value that this home is being purchased for. This becomes really important when we're writing our offer and doing our due diligence and looking at our comps and everything, because if the appraisal comes in different than the purchase value of the house, the buyer themselves are actually, it's necessary for them to come up with that delta. So it's very, very important that if we know it's a competitive situation, we're either very confident with the price that we're putting forward that keeps us protected, or if it's a home that is just a must-have, we're prepared to pay any differences in that appraisal gap, right? So that's important to note there. Once we've gone through there, we'll start getting our loan approval and pretty much all speed ahead from there. Like I said, if we get an appraisal that doesn't come back and we had a contingency for that, this is where we are able to renegotiate again or possibly make any changes down the line. If we've gotten any new discoveries throughout this process, right? This is really important. People make mistakes. It's probably pretty alarming to know that most real estate transactions don't always go to plan, right? So when you have a new discovery or something like that, or we've found a breach of contract or things like that, that's where a good agent will make sure that you're protected through this whole process so you don't run into any issues along the line. Okay. So now that we're moving through there, now you're making sure you're scheduling your move, your utilities, all very straightforward in this sense. Home insurance today is a little bit of a tricky spot. So starting that as soon as you can becomes really important to just making sure this is a very approachable and easy process for you at the same time. Then one of our last milestones is we're going to hit your final walkthrough. And so what that is us basically walking through the house. Usually we have 2 additional times to kind of go check out the home after you've gotten an accepted offer. But the first time usually is to go do measurements, check things out. And then the second time is this final walkthrough, which we're just making sure that no parties have been thrown in the house, right? We're making sure that everything is as we purchased it. Right. So in that case, no pipes have burst, things like that, because if those have happened, that's going to be our time to make sure that we hold off from closing, because once we're closed on a home, we've lost all of our leverage to pretty much make sure that everything falls in line where we need it to be. Perfect. And then from there, we're going to have our final documents, right? Our final closing documents are going to go out. We're going to do a ton of signing. We're in California. Everybody loves to sue each other. So that stack of papers that you get to sign is never ending one way or another. And then as we get about 2 days before close, you're going to see your closing deposit go in. That's the rest of your down payment will come across. And then you will be pretty much just waiting for the county recording and officially experience your closing day and get the keys handed over. So I know that was a mouthful, but that is really as close as I can condense it, really the whole buying process when it comes together.
All right, Chris, that was awesome. And I just stress on here all of the information that came in that period of time. I've sat down with Chris and clients, and that discussion itself could be an hour, hour and a half. So we're pouring in a lot of information in a short period of time. So we really appreciate you guys here. Again, we're here for more questions. We're here for everything afterwards. Chris, great job. Thank you so much for going through such a complicated timeline in such a short period of time, and thorough as well. So appreciate it. Shannon, you're going to start coming on here now. Shannon Ellison's coming on to the group here to talk about evaluating properties and neighborhoods like a pro. So we're going to put this on here for you, Shannon, and we're going to dismiss ourselves. You have the floor. Thank you.
Gotta make sure I come off mute. That will help. All right, guys, we're gonna hop right in. Tips for evaluating properties. I'm gonna start with probably one of the most important, which is schools, especially in our area with a lot of buyers that are buying with young children. So one of the biggest drivers we see of property value is the school district. The better the schools, more desirable the location, and therefore the higher price of the homes in those neighborhoods. There could be a single street dividing a neighborhood that has two different high schools, and the homes could be $200,000 to $300,000 difference in values just because of the school district. So even if you don't have school-age children, knowing about the schools is also a factor for resale potential, or if you ever want to rent out the property in the future, the schools could make a difference based on what type of renter is going to want to rent that property. Next is street location. Is the home on a through street or a cul-de-sac? Maybe it's at a stop sign intersection. There's going to be a lot more noise and stop and go traffic at those locations, but you might save money on the purchase price depending on how hot the market is at those noisier locations, which leads perfectly into noises and nuisances. Don't just tour homes out there with your eyes, but close your eyes and listen. Are you hearing planes, trains, the neighbor's barking dog, or just neighbors in general that might be loud? We can always refer to the disclosures that the seller provides, where the seller might disclose certain nuisances in the neighborhood, but a lot of times after an owner has lived in a home for 10 or 20 years, they may not even notice that the BART train goes by every hour anymore, but you're going to notice it, at least for the first several months that you live there. Next, we'll go into views. Views can obviously affect a property's desirability. Views of the hills and mountains mean buyers might pay a lot more. Remember to look for things, negative views too, like power lines and power towers, and be aware of just the overall lack of views. Like in a townhome community, even if the blinds are shut, maybe open those. Want to see what view that window has, like staring into the neighbor's living room, for instance. Next is walkability. Some people might see value in walking distance to major amenities, whereas some people are going to be more keen on being further away from downtown life. But if you're okay with further commute times, you might save money by purchasing somewhere a little bit further away from central downtown locations. Just know your preference and set your search radius around those areas accordingly. Which leads me into commutes. And I'm sure you all noticed that the majority of tech companies here in the heart of Silicon Valley, like Sunnyvale and Mountain View and Santa Clara, the closer that you get to those areas, generally the more expensive the homes get. So decide how far, if you're in tech, you want your commute to work to be, and then draw your search radius accordingly. And I always recommend my buyers to drive that commute, at least at the times of day that they're going to be doing it on the regular, and get a feel for the drive time that you're going to be living with for maybe the next several years, or at least until you sell or move jobs or retire. Next is a big one, super important, and that is future developments. And I always rely on city websites. They are such a great resource to find what permits have been filed for projects that are in the planning phases. And this can help you to decide if it might help or maybe hurt the future property value of a house that you're looking at in the long term. It's usually going to help your value if it's projects like parks and schools and churches or or community centers, but maybe plans for something like a government or industrial site might be a different story. So really lean on those city websites and find out everything you can of a house in a property area before you purchase. Next is types of lots, sizes, and usability is very important. A 15,000 square foot lot might not be twice as desirable as a 7,500 square foot lot if it's on a huge hillside with less than half of that lot being usable space. So shape is important as well if you're ever considering on building onto a property or potentially adding ADUs, which a lot of homeowners are considering these days for additional rental income. Next is hazard zoning. This can also affect your property insurance if you're in one of those high risk zones. Check out a document in those disclosure reports, which a good agent is going to be reviewing with you. That NHD, natural hazard disclosure, is going to detail where a certain property falls. Maybe it's in a special flood zone or a high risk fire zone, which in such case will affect insurance required for the property. Next is property facing. This is a huge thing for some cultures in our area that practice Vastu or Feng Shui. Property direction or door facing can sometimes affect value, but we don't see it so much in very low inventory competitive markets like we often see here in the Bay Area. It is possible in the market we're in now could pose a little bit of opportunity for buyers being more selective on which way a property faces, but maybe not for long as we head into 2026. And next is nicest home on the block. Maybe not always the best plan. Being actually the worst house on the block might be better for your value because all of those bigger or more upgraded homes around it actually bring up your land value, not necessarily the structure on the land itself. Because remember, the main value of your property is not necessarily the materials of the structure, but it's actually the land that it sits on. And this is one of the biggest driving forces of all of the appreciation in the Bay Area is just the lack of new land to build on. So with the low supply and consistent demand from buyers, that's why the prices here tend to stay stable and move upwards over time, is we are kind of landlocked here. Next is multi-units nearby. So when you're driving around and considering homes, also drive up and down those parallel streets to see if there's any multifamily or maybe like small apartment units nearby, because having a high concentration of renters in an area can affect a home value over time as well. The less rental turnover an area has, generally, the better appreciation it has long-term. Next, we'll consider cost of upgrades. And I want to say right next to school districts, this is probably one of the biggest things that buyers consider before purchasing. So you want to be realistic with costs because a lot of homes here are older and so many of them are going to need upgrades. But a good agent is going to be able to ballpark the cost of floors and remodels and appliances. It's super easy for buyers to overestimate the cost of minor fixes and repairs that come up in those reports. And if they're scared, they completely can pass up a very good home that fits a lot of their criteria because they just aren't being realistic with the costs associated with those fixes. So that's where we come in and help you ballpark those. And we can help you discern what's important to tackle in short term versus what things can maybe wait 6 to 12 months. Next is talking to the neighbors. And this is the best way to find out the truth about a neighborhood. I've knocked on so many doors for buyers, and especially the ones on either side of a home that they're about to make an offer on. And we found out some very interesting things about the neighbors that we may not have known otherwise by just looking at the seller's reports. So always talk to the neighbors. I have a story of some buyers that were about to offer on a home, and we talked to people across the way, and they didn't have anything to say about the home they were going to offer on, but they were like, the home next door, we think is a drug dealer's house. We never would have known unless we were talking to the neighbors. Was it true or not? We're not sure, but how else would we have known that information besides knocking on those doors? Next is due diligence. What Chris said already, be sure to review all your disclosures, reports, and documents before you make an offer, especially a non-contingent one. If there's no inspections provided, get an inspection. We've got all the references and trusted inspectors that we've worked with for so many years so you can trust that you're working with true professionals. And some parting thoughts before I hand it back over. Just remember, when you're out there shopping for homes and you're looking at your checklist for what you need in a property and it's checking a lot of your boxes, chances are that it's also checking a lot of other buyers' boxes as well. But try not to worry about how many people are going to be offering on the home. If you love the home and you're comfortable with the mortgage payment at that offer price, make an offer. Why? Because that closing price of that house, especially as we go into a spring market next year, is going to be the new benchmark for that size home in that neighborhood. So the next couple of weeks, when another one comes up in that area, all the people that missed out on that home are now going to be offering on the next one that comes up. And we see a leapfrog effect in prices through the spring. So get in where you can, lock your rate, and watch your values rise for many years to come.
Nice, Shannon. That was great. I love that. Great little piece on there at the end. So much information. People just don't consider this. It's great to share this. It's great to go through here. I don't know why we don't charge for this. All of this is free for everybody. This is pretty amazing. So I hope everybody really likes what you're getting in here. We've got 2 more topics to cover over here, and then we'll wrap this up. It's going to be gold. These 2 topics are great. Adam's going to be coming on next here to talk about the common mistakes that first-time home buyers make, but it's not just first-time home buyers. Sometimes people are repeat offenders. So we're going to help you coming through there to know what that is. And we're going to finish it off with how to write a good offer. If you remember at the beginning, I said there are bad offers. So you're going to get a little bit more information on that as well. And then we're just going to give information, how to follow up with this information, how to get copies of these slides, how to get more information afterwards. So Shannon, thank you again. We're going to put you back in the corner. We're going to put Adam up here ready to go. So Adam, take it away.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Keith. Yeah, well, let's jump right in, guys. So common mistakes for first-time home buyers. And as Keith mentioned, there are repeat offenders. So it's not always first-time home buyers that are making these mistakes. First up, not interviewing multiple agents and or looking at homes before this step. Now, most buyers don't realize that they are essentially choosing a business partner for one of the biggest financial decisions of their lives. Interviewing multiple agents helps you understand experience levels, strategies, communication styles, and someone who will truly advocate for you. So the right agent doesn't just open up doors, they protect your investment and guide you along the way. Next up, choosing the wrong type of agent. Some are educational, others are just simply transactional. Not all agents operate the same way. Some are order takers who just send listings and write up a contract, while others are true educators who explain risks, they explain strategies, contracts, and long-term impact. A limited service agent may seem like a good option at first, but a full service educational agent often saves you like up to tens of thousands of dollars in mistakes and negotiation power. Next, we have making large purchases. So before you close on your home, your credit profile must be stable. Buying, say, a car, opening new credit cards, or financing furniture can change your debt to income ratio and can even cause your loan to be denied at the last minute. So always talk to your lender before any major purchase, but the best rule of thumb here is no major purchases before buying your home. Next up is not understanding your budget. Many buyers only look at that initial mortgage payment and they forget about property taxes, insurance, HOA fees, utilities, and maintenance. A home can feel affordable at first until that full monthly picture hits. So a real budget should be based on that total ownership cost, not just the loan. We see this one a good amount too, not getting that pre-approval. So without your pre-approval, you're really just shopping blind. You don't know your true buying power and you can miss out on a great home. So that pre-approval also prevents that emotional heartbreak that comes from falling in love with homes that you were never really qualified to buy. All right, next we have not understanding closing costs. Closing costs are real money. They show up at the end of the transaction. These are things like lender fees, escrow fees, title fees, insurance, among other things. Many buyers are shocked because they never planned for this. So knowing your estimated closing costs upfront really avoids a lot of last minute panic, and your agent should be able to provide you this and or the lender. Next up, and this is a really big one here, not reviewing disclosures, HOA docs, or getting the proper inspections. So disclosures and inspections exist to protect you, the buyer. So skipping them or rushing through them can mean inheriting like structural problems, lawsuits, special HOA assessments, or uninsurable properties. This is where buyers either protect themselves or they can really get burned. I actually had a client whose home I sold, single family home in San Jose. And about a year later, I found out that she bought an out of area condo. I was a little confused and I asked her why she didn't call me to help her with the purchase. And she told me that she thought it was too far away and that I didn't service that area. Long story short, she just told me that she used a random agent and that agent did not review the disclosures with her. So within a few months of her owning the home, she was slapped with a special assessment of over $10,000. And she was super upset because she felt blindsided. That agent never sat down with her and went over these types of things. And these types of situations, they happen all the time, but they can usually be foreseen with a thorough review of the HOA docs and the disclosures. So a strong agent is always going to sit down with you and review the disclosures with you. Next up, we have not understanding the cost of upgrades, and as Shannon mentioned, or overestimating the costs. Some buyers underestimate renovation costs and get financially overwhelmed. Others overestimate those costs and they miss those great homes that only need a little bit of minor work. So having realistic estimates will help you make confident, smart decisions. And again, your realtor should be able to help with this. Next up, we have not understanding the risks of non-contingent offers. We've touched on non-contingent offers quite a bit. The Bay Area market generally moves fast, and oftentimes it does take a non-contingent offer to win a home, especially if there are going to be multiple offers. But removing contingencies, while removing contingencies can help you win in a competitive market, it does shift that risk onto the buyer, right? So if financing fails, inspections reveal major problems, or the home doesn't appraise, the buyer can lose their deposit. So this is really a strategic move, not a casual move. Each strategy will vary with each home and scenario. So that's something you really want to discuss with your agent as far as what's the best move forward. This next one has really been popping up more lately, and that's shopping for insurance too late. Some buyers will wait until the last few days to get insurance, and they find out that the home is hard to insure due to, say, fire zones, past claims, or roof issues. This can delay or even kill a deal. So buyers can lose their deposit by waiting until the last minute. And buyers falling out of contract due to insurance is really at an all-time high now. So insurance should be researched early in that process, not at the finish line. So, your realtor should also be able to recommend a good insurance company and get you a quote so you can understand that cost. Again, another thing we see a lot is trying to nickel and dime in negotiations and losing out on a home that you really want. We see people fighting over small dollar amounts, and that can cost you the home. In competitive markets, sellers are going to choose that clean offer, that strong offer, that confident offer, not the cheaper offer with a lot of counter demands. So that strategy matters more than trying to squeeze those last few dollars. And then lastly, we have looking for a deal or just like waiting it out. Again, we see this a lot and hear this a lot, but we all want a deal, but many buyers end up sitting on the sidelines hoping for that perfect deal, right? Or trying to time the bottom of the market. But the truth is the best opportunities often go to those prepared buyers who act strategically, not emotionally or fearfully. We never know when the bottom of the market hits until that's behind us. And then by that time, the market is appreciating again. So the best advice that I can give you in a nutshell is if you like the area, you like the layout, you're comfortable with the total mortgage, and you plan on being there for at least 5 to 7 years, then it makes sense to go for it and submit a strong offer. That's it for me.
That's it. Nice job, Adam. So
Keep
that was
this
great.
loading.
So a lot of good, I shouldn't say good mistakes, but a lot of mistakes that people make. So a lot of clarity on how to help avoid them, how to go through it, how to have the right representation to help with that. On that story you shared about the
Keith is still loading.
Am I still at?
If I knew a good joke, I'd tell it right now, but I got nothing.
I can hear you from my side. Let me see if we pop into here. Hey, Chris, can you hear me okay?
There's Chris.
Yeah,
Okay.
everything's coming through. So I might be on Adam's end over there.
Okay, cool. We got it. We're in here. We're good to go. Adam, that story, if you can't hear me, that story about the client buying the condo and having that $10,000 assessment, man, it's terrible. And it's, there's so many horror stories out there, and it's unfortunate that people don't realize it. They don't hear the horror stories that are out there because most people don't leave bad reviews. And so, it's unfortunate when you see that, but it happens more than people would like to know. So thankfully, you went through all this to help people get some clarity, go through the things. Very well done. Love the insurance piece. That's important. And the nickel dime piece is really important as well. I've seen so many people end up paying so much more for a house because of that with market changes. So thanks for knocking that out. We are going to move into the last one that we talked about. Adam, thank you again. We really appreciate you. We're going to go into the last one. We talked about how to prepare the offer the right way. Again, there's wrong offers for sure. So Chris, who I don't even know if he knows how many offers he's written over time. So, but he's going to roll on here and give us some pieces. Chris.
All right. Thank you. So hopping back in here, and I know people will notice there's like a lot of ideas that keep resurfacing. I stress it so much, like write those down, go research them more. There's a reason why we're trying to put it your way. Like I said, we just want you to walk away from this at least educated, so you're making smart decisions out there. Okay. So now we're really getting into the offer scenario, right? So we're getting in the trenches now. We're putting pen to paper. We got skin in the game, right? So there's a lot of aspects of the offer that we really need to think about. And I want to go over really the basics of what an offer looks like. Like I said, there are so many ways, different ways to purchase real estate, especially when it comes to financing, the type of style you're going, right? But, for a lot of people, it's the first time home buyer experience. It's the transfer from, an old home to a new home, right? So those are the typical situations we're going to see in a lot of manners. So I'm going to try to go over what that looks like for the most part. We're always happy to dive in more advanced strategies, those types of things, investor side, right, on on a different call or something like that. But today I'll try to keep it short and sweet. So when we are really going into offer, I know Shannon's touched on it a bunch. Adam has as well. It is so important to go in and do your research correctly, right? We really want to understand the area. We want to understand the X factors. We want to make sure that we understand the value to ourselves, your personal value of the home, and also what others may perceive the value. Do not just trust Zillow or Redfin. It is pretty insane how wrong the estimates are in our area. I always love to tell the fun story that the Zillow exec ended up selling his property for like 40% difference than his estimate. So that's always a fun one to go after. But when we're going into that, we've talked about disclosures. If you've got the time for it, right, before you're preparing this offer, being able to understand what those costs to improve it or any of those red flags that come up, right, those become very important. We've talked about our pre-approval and everything like that, But the important part of getting ready too is just like, make sure you're stepping within your bounds, right? I've definitely seen people go purchase above, what they're approved for, but, surprises come up, things happen, right? So just be smart about that when you're really considering buying a home. That goes the same way for looking at homes. You go look at a home that's like at the top of your budget and we're in an appreciating market and that one sells. And next thing you know, you're looking at other homes and nothing's going to stack up to that, right? Or something out of your budget, right? So we're working backwards sometimes in those manners. But so going back to the comps, right? Once again, we want to really lock this in because we want to understand what a competitive offer is at the end of the day. And we also want to make sure that we avoid any of those appraisal issues down the line. A lot of people think you just take price per square foot and kind of go across there. That's a common misconception, right? Once again, a home is really worth what somebody's willing to pay for it. But we want to have a good range of what we can expect. And this is all going to change based on competition, contingencies, all of that good stuff across the board. So when we're looking at it, you really want to understand what a neighborhood is doing. There's a lot of micro neighborhoods in the Silicon Valley. One may be doing a lot differently than others. For example, 1-bedroom condos in the Silicon Valley, right, are absolutely stale right now, for a good sense of words. But then again, we just helped some clients over on a new construction home over in Mountain View, and we're seeing multiple offers, right? No problem. And things selling for above. So we just really want to understand that across the board. So once again, finding like comps, there really is a science to it. And we make sure that we go into that and kind of do a whole storytelling process. And so just make sure that you're equipping yourself the best way. At least 3 solid comps are really what we're looking for. Pending home data is always going to be the most important thing. As an agent, we're usually pretty good at finding ways to go find out what a home is pending for versus just recent solds, right? Ideally, we're looking within the past 3 months, right? So I'm not going to try to go too far into that, especially considering the offer and situation. So we've talked about disclosures. We go through all of those together, ideally, right? And we really understand any of those situations. So now when we're writing up this offer, what we're really going to decide is a few different things, right? Of course, number one, we're going to decide price. Sometimes in a situation with negotiations and things like that, it can actually make sense to offer a higher price, but maybe ask for some concessions if we have that room to negotiate. And a lot of times when it's a multiple offer market, right, what we're going to do is probably not have contingencies in certain situations. And so I'll talk about what that means as well a little bit down the line. So we've got price, we've got contingencies, right? We've got our days to close. Those are usually some of the main factors. A lot of the traditional costs, right, when it comes to closing costs, transfer costs, county fees, all of those things are also represented in the offer. Anything that is requested to stay with the house, those types of things that we really draw up. So like I said, every situation is very unique. You know, maybe the house has an ADU, a shed that you'd like, something like that. It's all negotiable at the end of the day within reason of what that offer process and competition looks like. So going into the contingency idea, right? There's three major contingencies that we have. We have a property contingency, which is one of the most protective ones. Usually these contingencies are anywhere from like 3 to 7 days on certain offer situations. Sometimes we see them go longer. If it's a home that might not be getting a lot of love, competition, it was overpriced, it's been sitting on the market. And we have to understand, of course, the seller's expectations and motivation in selling as well. That's important when we're writing up an offer the right way. And so doing that background research, understanding how to play that game, right, that all becomes a part of putting the right offer together, keeping you protected, getting the right price in. So we kind of hinted out this a little bit earlier. When it comes to these homes, especially you hop in the market, you find a home that's absolutely perfect or close to perfect, right? Best available out there is a lot of situations that we talk about. But when you're ready and you're down to it and offers come in, and then all of a sudden the home sells for a price you were willing to pay, a lot of people fall into this situation. And then next thing you know, they have a hard time finding something. They get priced out of what they really wanted. So this is when we're really considering price. We want to take that, but if you are comfortable with the mortgage payment and that house looks like it's a good opportunity for you, you got to put your foot forward, right? It's a competitive market. A lot of people don't like to hear that, but sometimes that's what it takes. If we have that negotiation power, of course, that's where we're going to start to get a little fancy with it, figure out what we can accomplish. So that will be that. Going back into the contingencies, right, with that property contingency, that allows us to get inspections. That allows us to go check out things, go take measurements, get contractors in the home, right, if we have that ability. The second contingency is going to be your appraisal contingency, right? And so in the case of the appraisal contingency, we're pretty much protecting ourselves. That says, hey, if we're worried the appraisal comes back, not to our liking, we're able to go and renegotiate, right? And that's what that does. That one is often waived first. We usually, if we're able to get contingencies in, the property contingency is probably the most common that we're going to see. Going into the loan contingency, if we have any considerations about the loan might not getting approved or going through, that's where that comes into play as well. So in any situation that you can have contingencies, definitely go forward and have them. It's going to keep you protected, but also just being very clear and transparent in our area. Contingencies are sometimes a luxury, and so we have to consider that as well. Okay. So we talked about price. We've got contingencies. We've got all those across the board, close dates, right? So here's a few different scenarios that can really come across the board. And before I go into those scenarios, one last thing that I wanted to touch upon is when it comes to an offer, there's definitely a wrong way of writing an offer. We want to keep our offer pretty clean at the end of the day if we're in a competitive situation, but there's a lot of ways to write that offer correctly that keep you protected. Once again, half the reasons why issues come across is because we don't lock in things up front, and doing all this research up front and writing a very solid offer is going to keep you protected no matter what happens. We draw everything out up front, and that becomes a very important part of negotiation as well. So with that, going back into the scenarios. So we've written our offer. Usually what's going to happen is we're going to get a response, typically within 24 hours. And a few things can happen. One, we get our offer accepted outright. We celebrate. We go ahead and move forward. We go with the EMD, right? Number two is what can happen is we can just get straight out denied. Sometimes if we go right a really low ball on an offer, sometimes we have an emotional seller on the same time on the opposite side. And in that case, sometimes they'll just shun you away from there. Other scenarios, we're going to get into a counter situation. So you can get into a single counter situation where you go back, the sellers are coming and say, hey, we're only interested in your offer, but we would like to adjust terms or price. And then that's really where the dance starts to happen on that side. The other scenario is that we have multiple offer or multiple counter offers go out. So when a multiple counter situation goes out, everybody is kind of given the chance to step up their offer. In those cases, it's usually smarter to actually come back with an additional step up, as long as we know that they're not just bluffing or kind of asking for something unreasonable. So a lot more to that, but I'll keep it at that. Okay. And so the last couple of things, just kind of wrapping that up, is once again, just keep it clean, get ready for it, understand the different costs of like what your adjustments would look like in an offer when you step into that situation. You really want to have that locked in, because sometimes it's a really quick opportunity or situation. And so you want to be able to make those decisions going forward, having your team by your back, understanding those differences with your lender and those types of things. So with all of that, that is a good overview of how to check out and write smart offers so that you can go in and be confident that you're purchasing a good investment at the end of the day.
All right. Nice, Chris. Thank you very, very much again. So I'm going to bring everybody back on stage here. Again, listen to what Chris just said about the offers and about what a good offer is, because there's those little pieces, those little nuances make such a big difference in not only getting a home or not getting a home, but also protecting yourself from liability down the road. So, and making sure that, you know, you're making a good investment. So excellent, Chris. Great information. So really appreciate it. Let's, I'm going to give a couple quick different things here and we can wrap you guys up coming through here. Really appreciate everybody coming through. The first thing is, again, we talked about this a little bit earlier. If you thought this was informative, I know there's a lot of information in a short period of time. You know, save these dates, share this with somebody else for future events. Our next dates are after the holiday. On Thursday, we'll have another buyer workshop in line. We're trying to bring in another extra topic on each one, so there'll be new stuff in there to share. And then also we're going to have a seller workshop that's Saturday, January 24th. That'll be online and also in person. So we do it in person in our Cupertino office, pastries, coffee. We make it fun and jovial. It's great to see people face-to-face over there, especially if you're a buyer considering that is selling and considering how to do this. How do you work it? How do you make it work on both sides? Do you sell first? Do you buy first? Do you do it concurrently? This is for you on top of that. So make sure that you're there for that piece. The other things, as I promised, is how you're going to stay in the know, right? This is the most watched real estate YouTube channel in the Bay Area. So this is the spot, 25,000 plus subscribers, growing every day, over $3.6 million views. If you just scan that QR code right there, take a picture of it, scan it later, whatever you want to do, that is going to take you to that spot to see videos that are informative, market updates that are happening on a regular basis. Lots of really good information that we're going to put over there for you. And then the last piece is, here's a link if you want to follow us on social media. That is where you follow us. If you, again, scan that, take a picture of that, so that will get you there and carry you through everything. And then I am going to bring the rest of the crew up here right now, which again, thank you everybody for being part of this. Here's your speakers again, Chris, Jason, Adam, Shannon, all of you were incredible. I feel smarter after being on this, so thank you for that. So, and everybody on here, I'm sure we have just tremendous information. If you have any comments or any questions that are left over, you can pop them on there. Also, you can reach out to us afterwards. So all of you have registered, you'll have the information on here. All of these slides will be available, as well as contact information. So you can follow up if you want to start a process or have a one-on-one meeting coming through here, go through the pre-approval process. Because, you know, even with a great day full of information like today, we know a lot of this information is not going to be retained. It is a lot, and a lot of it was at rapid fire. So we'll also make you an offer. We're committed to helping you, and we'll continue this workshop at a coffee shop or in our office for you with no obligation to bring the information you want. And then you can implement this plan with whoever you want. However, we just want to give this to you as a bonus. We're here to educate and to make people have the opportunity and learn more to make better decisions. So thank you, everybody. Any parting words?
Thanks for joining, everybody.
Happy holidays.
Yeah, thank
Happy
you.
holidays. Awesome. Happy holidays, everybody. Thank you. Thank you so much. Take care.